Good evening. I'm liking this more and more that we're moving back. Let's see, 4 pews, and then I can get up in the pulpit again. So I like that. Let's keep it up. I want to invite your attention tonight to 1 Samuel chapter 18. 1 Samuel chapter 18, we'll get there in a few minutes. Thought I might preach a very practical, very basic sermon tonight on something we all need, every one of us needs, in order to help us get through this life and get to heaven. Because this audience is made up of a lot of different people, a lot of different personalities, I guess I should say. There are some who are pretty loud. I'm not putting you in a category now. You put yourself there. There are some of you that are very quiet, and that's okay. The loud part's okay too. Just don't get on my nerves, and we're all right. There's some of us that are very obnoxious, but then there are some of us that are very reserved, and that's okay. This audience is made up of a lot of different personalities. Some of us very outgoing. My daddy embarrassed us on vacation. I've told you that. I mean, we'd be at an amusement park. He'd just go up to somebody he didn't know, and he'd just talk to him like, "Daddy, Daddy, Daddy, come here." Or you'd be like, "I don't know that guy. I don't know him," and I've become my daddy. I know the girls are like, "Hey, would you quit talking?" But anyway, some are very shy, and that's okay. That's okay. Because every one of us, no matter what our personality is, we may think we don't, but we all have something in common. And we all have a need for good friends. Every one of us in here has a need for good friends. And that's what we're going to look at tonight, because there's a danger in the world we live in. Our society, especially in America, it's not as true in Honduras. It's a very open society, very open community. And I think it's because of maybe we're so comfortable now. Back when even when I was growing up, I remember just going to people's houses. There were no locked doors hardly. And then daddies told me about people who used to come over to their house because they were the only ones that had a phone. Everybody came over to their house to use their telephone. But now everybody's got one of these, right? Let me see if I can get it out. Everybody's got one of these, right? Some form of this, a cell phone. And we've all got friends, right? You might have 1,000 friends here, right? But are they really friends? Are they really your friends? I get friend requests from people I don't even know. Have no idea who they are. I mean, I can't call them my friends because they're not my true friends. I don't know them. But we need true friends. There's a lot of people now that gaming's big. I've got a best friend. I play video games with them. I've never seen them, but boy, we're good. We're tight or whatever. We stay in our homes a lot. Watch TV. There's isolation today, especially in America. And the writer of Proverbs had something to say about that, this isolation business. A man who isolates himself seeks his own desire. He rages against all wise judgment. So think about that when you want to isolate yourself and not have anything to do with the world. Cut yourself off. Isolation. Now, think about this. These kind of things, what do? They cause us to build our comfort zones, the walls of our comfort zones a little higher and a little thicker, and it's hard to even approach people. Now, I want us to think about something for a second. Who has a BFF? Anybody got a BFF? A BFF, a best friend forever. A best friend forever. Melissa's best friend forever is Jean. That's good. Your husbands, point at your wives. Point at your wives. You'll be in good shape. But anyway, the best friend forever. I want us to look at what it really means to have a best friend forever. Because Let me ask you this. If they're not a Christian, can they be your best friend forever? Think about it. Now we're going to look, we studied this morning about the importance of the Old Testament and how we need the Old Testament, how the Old Testament is a blessing to us with all the examples that it gives us. We're going to look at an example of a good friendship that starts out here in 1 Samuel 18 with Jonathan and David. Now before I read any of this, and I am going to just read, I'm going to let the God's Word speak to us tonight by reading His Word. This friendship comes on the heels of David's defeat, David's defeat of Goliath. Now, Jonathan could have been like his daddy. Saul was very jealous of David. He was very envious of David because we know when he came in, everything was good till the ladies started singing. And they started singing, Saul is slain his thousands and David his 10,000. And when that happened, immediately Saul's heart turned envious, turned jealous, and turned hateful. And Jonathan could have said, oh, well, that's how my daddy feels. Well, that's how I'm going to feel too. That's how daddy, I want to be like my daddy. And the way he feels, I'm going to feel. But he didn't do that. He didn't feel like that. He could have joined his father in trying to destroy David. But he didn't do that. He did not do that. He honored his friendship with David even in the difficult times. So let's look at that tonight. Why was their friendship a good friendship? And why was it a BFF situation? A best friend forever type situation. Well, number one, it was based in love. You find that in verse 1. Now when they had finished speaking to Saul, the soul of Jonathan was knit. You get that? Knit to the soul of David. And Jonathan loved him as his own soul. Do you have somebody that feels that way about you? I would hope that we would feel that way about each other in the body of Christ. Our souls are knit together because that's the way the picture we get in Ephesians 4, 11 through 16 of the church. Body. 1 Corinthians 12, 21 through 27. The body is together, right? Unless it's cut off or chopped up. That's the way the body ought to be. And a friend, we find in Proverbs 17:17, loves at what? All times. Not some of the time. A true friend, a BFF, loves at all times. Now, is that difficult to do sometimes? It is at times. But we can overcome. And that's the way Jonathan, they went through some rough stuff. Jonathan to David. But they loved each other at all times, just like the writer of Proverbs said. It was also based in understanding. Look at verse 3 of 1 Samuel 18. Then Jonathan and David made a covenant. We saw that this morning. An agreement. Because he loved him as his own soul. Because their friendship was based in love, they could understand or would seek to understand each other. Even in a disagreement. What happens sometimes in disagreements? Somebody will throw their hands up and just walk off, right? That's not a love-based friendship. I've had that happen even here talking with somebody. We didn't agree about something. Throw their hands up and walk off. Is that friendship? No. But we can have that. They made a covenant together. An agreement. An agreement. Because they understood each other. They wanted to understand. And sometimes understanding takes a want to. Sometimes understanding doesn't just happen. We have to want to understand each other. Want to understand another person's position. And we find him over in Proverbs 18. I did mark my Bible tonight. Proverbs 18:24, very familiar passage to all of us. A man who has friends must himself be friendly. But there, if we have a friendly person, that's a friend who sticks closer than a brother. one who is willing to understand the other's position. And that's the way they were. They had a covenant. Also in verse 4, we find that Jonathan and David, they had that true friendship, that BFF situation, because they were willing to share with one another. Look at verse 4. And Jonathan took off the robe that was on him. He's a prince now. And gave it to David with his armor, even to his sword and his bow and his belt. He shared some of the most valuable things at the time. His very protection, his very cloak. He shared it with David. They were willing to share. And Jonathan, we really see here, usually we focus on David, even though he made mistakes. He's the kind of one of the pinnacles of the Old Testament. But here it's Jonathan. Jonathan, willing to share some of the things that should have been most important to him. And even may have been. But he shared them. In chapter 19, as we move on ahead, we find that they had this situation, a true friendship, because they had each other's backs. We need that, don't we? We need people who's got our backs, right? And that's the way we find here in 1 Samuel 19, verses 1 through 3. Now Saul spoke to Jonathan his son and to all his servants that they should kill David. But Jonathan, Saul's son, delighted greatly in David. So Jonathan told David, saying, My father Saul seeks to kill you. Therefore, please be on your guard until morning and stay in a secret place and hide. And I will go out and stand beside my father in the field where you are, and I will speak with my father about you. Then what I observe, I will tell you. He had his back. He was concerned about him and concerned about his physical welfare. But today, shouldn't we be concerned about each other's spiritual welfare? Now that's a BFF. A best friend forever. Having each other's back spiritually. I want you to go to heaven. You want me to go to heaven. Ultimately, that should be every one of our goals in here, is to go to heaven and try to help each other go to heaven. Right? Right? In verses 4 through 6, we find that because they had each other's back, and these are kind of building off of one another, it was based in love, and they were willing to share, they had each other's backs, they would defend each other. They would defend one another. Look at 4 through 6 of 1 Samuel 19. Thus Jonathan spoke well of David to Saul his father. He's trying to soften him up, so maybe he won't have that bad attitude. He's concerned about his daddy too. And said to him, let not the king sin against his servant, against David, because he has not sinned against you, and because his works have been very good toward you. For he took his life in his hands and killed the Philistine. He's reminding him of some great things that David did. And the Lord brought about a great deliverance for all of Israel. You saw it and rejoiced. He's reminding him, how did you react when that happened? When he killed that great giant? He said, you were rejoicing. Why then will you sin against innocent blood to kill David without a cause? Here's the spiritual part. We've looked at the physical, now we're looking at the spiritual. Daddy, you're about to sin and condemn your soul. So Saul heeded the voice of Jonathan, and Saul swore, as the Lord lives, he shall not be killed. So he was willing to defend each other, and even Jonathan was risking his life at this time, wanting to defend David. His daddy could have turned on him. And the way that Saul was emotionally, I'm surprised he didn't. Matter of fact, later on he did throw a spear at Jonathan. But they stuck together. Look at chapter 20, verses 1 through 4. They stuck together even when times are tough. That's when you find out who your true friends are, right? It's easy to have friends when everything is so good and just everything is going smooth. It's easy to be friends then, isn't it? It's when the times get really tough that we find out who our true friends are. Who's going to be there in the thick of the fight, in the tough times? Who will be there with me? Who's going to be there as my Christian friend, praying with me? Who is going to be there? Well, Jonathan and David were there for one another. Look at this, even in the tough times, verses 1 through 4. Then David fled from Naioth in Ramah and went and said to Jonathan, "What have I done? What is my iniquity, and what is my sin before your father that he seeks my life?" So Jonathan said to him, "By no means, you shall not die. Indeed, my father will do nothing, either great or small, without first telling me. And why should my father hide this thing from me? It is not so." Then David took an oath again and said, "Your father certainly knows that I have found favor in your eyes. And he has said, 'Do not let Jonathan know this, lest he be grieved. But truly as the Lord lives, and because your soul lives, there is but a step between me and death.' So Jonathan said to David, 'Whatever you yourself desire, I will do it for you.'" That was a tough time. Jonathan was in a rock and between a rock and a hard place. You ever been there? But he and David didn't split up over that. I mean, he's caught between his daddy and David. There. Tough times. True friend, BFF, will be there. And then in chapter 20, this will be a little more of a lengthy reading, but in verses 31 through 41, we find where they were willing to sacrifice. They were BFFs. Why? They were good friends. Why? Because they were willing to sacrifice for one another. Look at 31. It says there in chapter 20, verse 31 through 41, "For as long as the son of Jesse lives on the earth, you shall not be established, nor your kingdom. Now therefore send and bring him to me, for he shall surely die." And Jonathan answered Saul his father and said to him, "Why should he be killed? What has he done?" Then Saul, here it is, cast a spear at him to kill him, his own son. By which Jonathan knew that it was determined by his father to kill David. So Jonathan arose from the table in fierce anger and ate no food in the 2nd day of the month, for he was grieved for David, because his father had treated him shamefully. And so it was in the morning that Jonathan went out into the field at the time appointed with David, and a little lad was with him. Then he said to this lad, "Now run, find the arrows which I shoot." As the lad ran, he shot an arrow beyond him. And when the lad had come to the place where the arrow was, which Jonathan had shot, Jonathan cried out after the lad and said, "Is not the arrow beyond you?" Then Jonathan cried out after the lad, "Make haste, hurry, do not delay." So Jonathan's lad gathered up the arrows and came back to his master. But the lad did not know anything, only Jonathan and David knew of the matter. Then Jonathan gave his weapons to his lad and said to him, "Go carry them to the city." As soon as the lad had gone, David arose from a place toward the south, fell on his face to the ground, and bowed down 3 times. And they kissed one another, and they wept together, but David more so. Then Jonathan said to David, "Go in peace, since we have both sworn in the name of the Lord, saying, 'May the Lord be between you and me, and between your descendants and my descendants.'" That's that agreement that they had made forever. So he arose and departed, and Jonathan went into the city. They were willing to sacrifice for one another. But why did their friendship have these qualities? It's because of what we just read there in verse 42. It was based on faith. It was based on trust in God. That's why their friendship was so deeply rooted as it was to withstand all those things that they were thrown up against. That's the kind of friendships we need. We need friendships that are deeply rooted in trust and in faith in God. So what kind of friends should we look for? And make no mistake, 1 Corinthians 15:33 is very real. It is very real. "Behold, evil companions corrupt good manners." Now, understand within the context there, he's talking about those who didn't believe in the resurrection. But the principle is there. If we seek after evil friends, they're going to drag us down if we're not strong enough. And many times it goes that way rather than the other. And I've seen it over and over and over again. Now, I'm not saying don't try to be acquainted, don't try to help those who are in difficult situations. I'm talking about true friends. BFFs are only Christians. Because if you have those who are outside the body who are your BFs, I can't say F, can't add it. Because if they're not a Christian, they can't be your friend forever. I want to challenge us, turn to Psalm chapter 1. We need Psalm 1 friends. We've already talked about David and Jonathan and how their friendship was rooted in faith and trust in God. We need Psalm 1 friends. In Psalm 1 through 3, we find out these kind of people have a foundation in God. They have a foundation in God, and they will help us prosper in our spiritual growth. Do you want somebody to help you grow spiritually? Or do you want someone to pull you down spiritually? I mean, it's according to where you want to spend eternity. Do you want to spend eternity in heaven? Oh, it doesn't matter. I can sin a little bit with them and get on their level. And, isn't that what we looked at it this morning? Isn't that what Paul was talking about? I became all things to all men? No. He said that bluntly. I would not sin against God in that context. No, absolutely not. But here's the kind of friends we need. Psalm 1 through 3. Listen to this. Would you want this person as your friend? Blessed is the man who walks not, lives not, in the counsel of the ungodly. I'd like to have a friend like that doesn't live that way. Nor stands in the paths of sinners, nor sits in the seat of the scornful. But his delight is in the law of the Lord. You want a friend like that? Oh, that sounds like a boring friend. You need to reassess your situation if you feel that way. And in his law, he meditates day and night. Would you like somebody that really knows the Bible to be your friend? That could give you some good kind of counsel? I would. He shall be like a tree planted by the rivers of water that brings forth its fruit, spiritually speaking, in its season, whose leaf shall not wither, and whatever he does shall prosper spiritually. Would you like to have somebody like that as your friend? I would. And fortunately, I do. I can say that. Many, here we are, right? All right. I'd like a wise friend. What about you? We sang that song, the wise man built his house upon the rock, right? And he would withstand the storms of life because he's going to do whatever God says is good for him or her. But that foolish person, that house just crumbled because it had no spiritual foundation. Matthew 7, 24 through 27. So what kind of friend do you want? Do you want a wise friend that's going to counsel you in the right way? Or do you want that foolish friend that's going to crumble in the storms of life and probably help you to crumble with him or her? So think about this as we think about Psalm 1's friends. Let's go to Proverbs 27. Proverbs 27. And we find there some qualities again about a Psalm 1 friend. And you can see them here in Proverbs 27 in this wisdom literature. See, a Psalm 1 friend whose foundation is in God will be willing to do these things for us. In verse 6, they will be willing to lovingly correct us. I've been corrected since I've been here by a Psalm 1 friend. I appreciate that. Listen to that in verse 6. Faithful are the wounds of a friend. Faithful are the wounds of a friend. They may hurt a little bit, but when you sit down and think about the wisdom that's been given to you, and you think about it, what do you think about? Wow, that helped me spiritually. So they're willing to lovingly correct us. I'm not talking about arrogantly correct us. I'm talking about lovingly correct us. Would you want a friend like that? Anybody in here? No, I don't like to be corrected. Ooh, not me. By the way, I don't need correcting anyway. Well, we all need correcting from time to time. Also, they're willing to lovingly counsel us. Look at verse 9. Ointment and perfume delight the heart, and the sweetness of a man's friend gives delight by hearty counsel. Would you like someone to give you counsel in biblical matters? I'd like somebody that's wise enough to counsel me. I'm grateful that we have wise men, our elders, to help give us counsel when we need it. Do we go to our elders for that? They're our friends. Look at verse 10. Not only will they correct us, our Psalm 1 friends, not only will they counsel us, but they'll also do something else. Verse 10. Do not forsake your own friend, nor your father's friend, nor go to your brother's house in the day of your calamity. Better is a neighbor nearby than a brother far away. They will lovingly console us. There's times when it gets tough, right? And we need friends. We need spiritual friends that will lovingly comfort us in those difficult times. We've had a difficult year thus far, haven't we? It's been a difficult time. We've had some rough patches, but I'm grateful that I've seen it. I've seen Psalm 1 friendships here working with one another to console, to correct, to counsel. And then in verse 17, as iron sharpens iron, so a man sharpens the countenance of his friends. They will literally craft us, help us to become more like Jesus Christ. So that a Psalm 1 friend will correct us. They will counsel us. They will console us, and they will craft us. Verse 17, they will sharpen us spiritually. So do you have those kind of friends? I want to challenge us to not just seek Psalm 1 friends, but let us be Psalm 1 friends to others that are willing to do these things for others, especially of the brotherhood. Again, the brotherhood is the BFF, the best friend forever. So, how can we be a part of that brotherhood? Well, first of all, we got to be a friend. Before we can be a friend to everybody here, we got to be a friend with Jesus Christ. And why wouldn't we? Because He loved us enough to give up heaven. 2 Corinthians 8:9. He loved us enough to give up His life in a horribly sacrificial way on the cross for us. John 15:13. Greater love has no man than this, than to lay down one's life for his friends. And Jesus did that even when we were His enemies. Romans 5:6-10. And He wants to be your friend. But He can only be your friend if we will do what He tells us to do. A lot of people say, oh, I'm a friend with Jesus. Jesus said, if you love me, keep my commandments. John 14:15. He said, you are my friends if you do those things that I tell you to do. John 15 and verse 14. So, are we His friends? Have we done what He's told us to do? Have we obeyed the gospel? Have we believed that He is the Messiah, the Christ, the Son of God? And be willing to turn away from a life of sin and turn to a life of striving for righteousness? Living a life and also being willing to confess His sweet name, that He is the Son of God? And be willing to be buried with Him in baptism, where our sins are washed away, they are cut away, they are removed. And we are white as snow, and we are His friends. And He has promised for those people that He will always be there. He said that in the Great Commission. He said, "And lo, I am with you always, even to the end of the age." Matthew 28:20. He also said, "I will never leave you nor forsake you." Hebrews 13 and verse 5. But we've got to be His friends for that to happen. The question is, are we His friends? And if we are, let us be those Psalm 1 friends. Let's live for Him and let's live for one another. We can do that, right? That's not too hard. We can do that. Jesus gave His very best for us. And all He asks us to do is live faithfully for Him. So let us do that. Tonight, if you need the Savior's invitation, we're here for you as together we stand and sing.